This is an open letter to the Sane Society. There was this talk of why the cycle of uh, empires, why the empires go through a cycle. It seems it's it's very clear that the reason is dynastic power, multi-generational power. Although it creates stability, but the stability creates entitlement. Multi-generational power, when dynasties continues, multi-generational powers, dynastic powers without interruption, power power creates entitlement. And entitlement creates more power. So the concentration of power, and when you add the adage of the power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, dynastic power shortens the apex, makes the apex smaller. The entitlement creates more power, and more power creates more entitlements. And the apex becomes shorter and shorter with very fewer and fewer people on the top who actually make the decisions. I mean, they manipulate the media, and now we are talking about the Roman times. They manipulate the media, and they manipulate the gossip, and they manipulate this and they manipulate that, and to get their way, because decisions have been made, and then the reasons, just afterwards, reasons have to be found. Decisions have been made that we are entitled, we few, the chosen, are entitled to this power. Power creates entitlement, dynastic power, stability for a long time. What it brings dynastic power. You know, the Mars company, which is a dynasty that controls all the candy in North America at least, and wants to continue monopolizing the candy market in the world. Why not? Mars is a family empire, and this is as an example. No, no, nothing personal about the people at Mars, but as an example of dynastic power and concentration forming an apex, as you know, democracy, or as any end of democracy, hypocrisy, monarchy, any kind of power, that when it becomes multi-generational or continuous without interruption, whether the power is passed through hereditary or through election of a familiar name, because this name sounds familiar, so I'm going to vote for him. This is what, millions of dollars brings you. That's just make the fucking name sound familiar. Just start, yelling it from every hole you can find and you can pay for, and make the sound, make the name familiar to people in a good way. That's what advertisement buys. Make the name familiar to people in a good way. But then if this advertisement also works on your politics, and this election is not really election, it's more like the result of an advertisement campaign. I mean, so it's So that's why I'm saying that monarchic or democratic, it really doesn't matter because what is a monarchy? Is the richest guy in the land is the monarch. When MBS found out he is the monarch, but not the richest guy on the land, he collected all the richest guys in a hotel and fucked them up the ass until they paid up, until he became the richest man on the land because he's the monarch. He had the power, not the money. Now he's got the money. So you know that's the so monarchy, democracy. Also, in the democracy, the candidates which the richest people are willing to back becomes the candidate to be the monarch for 4 years. Again, if you usually 99.99% of the time, if you don't have very rich people backing you don't even become a candidate. You're not even allowed to be a candidate. Look at Bernie Sanders. Anyway, my point is this: that uh, dynastic power, stability for a long time, brings dynastic power. Even in the candy business, dynastic power creates a sense of entitlement. When I say entitlement, imagine Paris Hilton. That kind of entitlement is sort of like, yes, I am uh, part of the aristocracy of this crowd, although it's been only a couple of generations, but I am the aristocracy. And what I wear goes. What I wear becomes fashion. So you pay me, I wear what you. I have a last name, it's called Paris. It's very recognizable. I'm willing to wear your brand to make you recognizable as a fashion brand. And all these people follow me because I'm Paris. You see where I'm going with this? So this dynastic power creates the entitlement. I'm Paris, and entitlement of and go out the other way. The apparently Mr. McConnell's wife's father, one of his ships was carrying upwards of 700 kilograms of cocaine off the Colombian coast, and a legit commercial ship was carrying a large sum of cocaine, and apparently many times before has happened, maybe not, but this time somebody wasn't paid enough, and the ship was stopped and searched, and yeah. So the point is this: that's entitlement, that's dynastic power. Dynastic, not such in our last name doesn't have to match, but you know, if you were sucking my dick when I was, you know, senator this or senator that, then I look after you when I'm president. You know, that kind of entitlement. So the point is this: that this kind of dynastic power, the dynastic in the sense that the successor is chosen by the previous king, sort of like no election, no primaries. The way we just saw it in case of the Democratic Party, there was no primaries, and they just literally present you the candidate right at the end before the election, and before the election of now two rich people who are approved by the two people who are approved by the rich people. Uh, that's a kind of monarch. That's a kind of dynasty. The dynasty. My father used to back this group of politicians here, so I will back this group of politicians here because this group of politicians are beneficial to our business. and our business is a dynastic business of, let's say, arms manufacturing. So that dynasty creates a dynasty in politics, not father son kind of dynasty, but the boss, the assistant, and then the boss goes out, the assistant becomes the boss, and then the assistant is the boss, and the boss has as an assistant. Then when the time is for the boss to quit, he chooses his assistant. So that's a kind of dynasty. If the elected can choose his successor. Any question about that? No, there's no question about that. It is dynastic. If the you know previous boss can choose their own successor. Maybe that successor may not be their son, but it's a choice made by the previous boss. Still dynastic. People don't have a say. So my point is this: it's not that different. Monarchic, democratic. It's just that the dynasty in multiple aspects of society, economic dynasties and political dynasties and this dynasties and that dynasties, creates a sense of entitlement. That sense of entitlement is what gives somebody the right to say that no, 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 our way of life is much better than your way of life, so you have to change. That's the whole idea behind, our form of government is better than your form of government, so you have to change. Our form of, worship is, but thank God we are past that, supposedly. Our form of worship used to be like last century. Our form of worship is better than your form of worship, so you better, turn to our form of worship. That's the whole spread of, spreading Christianity in North America and South America and Africa and Asia, and now you're going around spreading democracy. It's again, if the decisions are made that we have to go spread something, spread ourselves usually. If we have to go spread ourselves, we have to come up with a popular reason for it. We're going there to improve something for the locals. And that's another sense of entitlement. You give yourself the title to say that yours is the best. My way of catching a rat is the best way of catching the rat, and there is no question about it. If you don't agree, I'm going to invade you. And I'm sorry, but you create dynasties, and then the Bush family was a prime example. Maybe the father had something between his ears, maybe he didn't. But the son certainly didn't have much except the last name. A familiar last name. What do you call that? So and then again, a very rich guy backed by very rich people is the current candidate. On the right you have very rich guy backed by very rich people, and on the left you have a very very perform to specs bureaucrat. I believe Mrs. Harris is a very well performed, uh, very well performed cog in the machinery that is. So that's why he is chosen by a large portion of rich people um, to become the boss, because she has shown herself to be dependable, not a revolutionary, not a, this shit is wrong. Not a, giving money to from this hand to this hand, giving money from this hand to this hand to bomb some brown people out of existence in Asia because they did something real bad. So we're going to bomb them out of existence. And anybody else has a problem with that, we're going to bomb them out of existence as well. That's the sense of entitlement that I'm talking about. That's the sense of entitlement that I'm talking about. That, you know, I mean, what gives you the right to determine what's the best way forward for different tribes around the same planet? They're not your tribes, they don't have your history, they don't have maybe your intelligence, maybe they don't have your um, attitude towards work or play or whatever. Maybe they don't share those with you. That doesn't make them wrong, invasion prone. That doesn't make them prone to being invaded. Shouldn't make them prone to being invaded because they're not you. If they're not your citizens, if they're not your subjects, they should expect being invaded if they don't carry the water the right way, the way you want them to carry the water. Carry your water. So the question is, yeah, apparently, dynasties, when dynasties form, forget about dynasties, when systems are stable for a very long time, entitled the entitlement grows out of the power that has kept the system stable for a very long time. The, the system has had enough power to keep it stable for a very long time. That creates dynasties, which creates a sense of entitlement, which uh, brings about conflict with other interests. When you feel entitled, if you just wake up one morning and you go to your neighbor's land and you say, I feel entitled to this land. Well, that's the prescription for war. Basically saying that, Ukraine needs to be part of NATO, wants to be part of NATO, because, we give them a hand job under the table here and there, or they give us a hand job under the table here and there. So we want to be close friends. But, the Russians think of Ukraine as they're very, the way you look at Cuba, it's very strategic, too close to not be an ally, too close for it not being ally. We accept Afghanistan not being an ally because too fucking far away, but we don't want to accept Cuba not being an But then that's the sense of entitlement. And suddenly, as the tent grows and your entitlements grows, suddenly you feel also Afghanistan needs to be an ally. If it's not an ally, we're going to put boots on the ground to make it an ally. That's the sense of entitlement that the empires apparently concluded. That you keep pushing the envelope, this sense of entitlement that Afghanistan also has to be an ally, and if they're not, Iraq also has to be an ally. Libya also, they also have to be an ally. If not, we're gonna, put up a facade of they're not democratic. No, so are many other countries. Pinochet was backed by you, and he wasn't very democratic. He just killed the democratically elected president. Democracy is only good. We get democracies get our stamp of approval only if our candidate wins. That's a sense of entitlement. That's a sense of and because and when you have this sense of entitlement, a lot of sane questions that has to be asked is not asked. The questions that needs to be asked before you step in a pile of shit, those questions don't even aren't even brought up because of the sense of entitlement. Because we know our form of government is the best form of government, then that's no more longer a question because we are entitled to that. We are entitled to think we are the best. I have the best penis. That's my entitlement. But that's because for a long time you haven't seen anybody else's penis, so you think your penis is the best penis. That's the sense of entitlement. Why you feel entitled? Because nobody else has put up a fight. The Iraqis were shocked and awed out of existence. The Libyans also were shocked and awed out of existence. These are small countries that, of course, they can be shocked and awed out of existence. But is that a good thing, planetary speaking? Because as I went over it in my previous video, it's not like you know people in jungles of Amazon, tribes living in jungles of Amazon. It's not like they actually need you to go tell them how they should treat their women. Neither, I mean, the Afghans need you to go and show them how they should clean themselves, how they should wash their hands, and how they should treat their women. It is what it is. This is where they are. They're living in 18th century. And you can't go and try to enforce 20th century, 21st century norms of New York City, try to impose those norms in downtown Kabul. But again, it's a sense of entitlement. We see you see yourself as entitled to expecting your norms everywhere in the world on your planet. Although other places are not living in 21st century, they're still living in 18th century in every sense, but you expect your norms to be implemented there with regards to their hygiene, with regards to their women, with regards to their uh, business, with regard everything. Your norms has to be implemented there because that's normal. It's normal for you. Why would it be normal for them? Why even the question arises is because of sense of entitlement. It's so people are so far up their own asses. Somebody like Bill Maher, uh, you know, I love his uh, programs, but he's very far up his own ass, and that's why the corporate media has kept him around. He's not well traveled. He hasn't lived in any other country beside his basement for most of his life. He moves from basement to basement in all these cities that he has programs, probably. Because you can tell because of the mental bubble that he's in. You can tell he doesn't interact much with anybody outside the few people that he has to interact in order to continue his what he likes to do as tell jokes. But honorable profession. But he has a bubble. and the people he surrounds himself, he doesn't have a reasonable conversation. He doesn't go and live in, you know, in Cairo for a year to experience life in Cairo. He doesn't do that. He doesn't go and live in Peking, Beijing for a year to experience life there. He doesn't do that. He sits in his basements and he says, "We white people are doing this. This is the right thing to do. If anybody is not doing this, they should be corrected by force if necessary. Sanctions and embargoes freely and force if necessary. If they don't change and become us and normal, and normal that we can understand, they're not you, sir. Their women are not your women. Their history is not your history. Their culture is not your culture. Their geography is not your geography. Their weather is not your weather. Their food is not your food. Their perspective in life is not your perspective. Their literature is not your literature. So they might look at life, you might, after knowing all this, you find out that they may have a different perspective in life than you. And they're entitled to it because, you can't change their weather, you can't change their history, you can't change their culture. So they may have a different perspective. That means different laws, rules, and regulations for the society to be able to coexist together. Have fucking peace. You don't go armed mujahideen in Afghanistan because some some short-sighted reasoning, based on some short-sighted reasoning that, oh, my enemy is my enemy, my enemy is my friend. That's a short-sighted reasoning. So not based on principles, but based on interest. Short-sighted reasoning are those reasonings that are not based on any principles, but based on interest. My interest is to fight this enemy now, then I will fight this enemy later. Well, that's interest. If you go about life just following your interest, this sense of entitlement will arise quite fast. I'm entitled to what is in my interest. And if my interest is taking over your land, well, we're going to take it over one way or another. If my interest is to take over your population, we're going to take over it one way or another. It's just in a democracy, it's easier to take over a unsuspecting population. Imagine Ukraine and Philippines. Imagine these two countries that, because they had democracies, they were very easy to flip, very very cheap, very clean. They just flipped. You know, they manipulated the media. Something that the first head of CIA went to Iran and manipulated media with, literally, with a case full of cash. The head of CIA went to Iran on a diplomatic passport where they couldn't check his luggage. The luggage was full of cash, and with, like, I think he took in $1 million. He was able to carry it through by the media and some important individuals in the military with $500,000 at that time, 1953. And you're thinking to yourself, this is it. This is, you started from there, and then you have evolved into, now we don't even have to buy anybody on the ground. We buy Facebook, and Facebook tells them who to vote for. or we have media groups. The media groups, we put more money towards one candidate than the other from outside, and those media groups which own all those radio channels in Manila will start pumping out favorable things about our candidate, and we win an election. We don't even have to spend any money locally. We just give it from Facebook to Facebook. The same money Facebook paid in taxes, we give it back to Facebook in order to manipulate an election in some part of the world for us. The way we want it, the way we recognize as normal, and what we recognize as normal is anybody who's our ally. Everybody should be our ally. Well, ally, servant, order takers, subservience. Seriously, there are no, Brit, Belgian military bases in North America, but there are many North American military bases in Belgium, for example. So, ally. So my point is this: that apparently the fourth turning that they're talking about is inevitable, because the sense of entitlement, as long as humans are ignorant enough not to recognize their sense of entitlement, and again back to sense of entitlement is when you consider your normal as what everybody should aspire to, and if they're not actively aspiring to your normal, they will be sanctioned and embargoed. That's a drone. They will be sanctioned and embargoed. Shit, I wonder if the next time it's carrying something. One of those samurai jobs, and they have to find my pieces. Oh, the dogs are going to eat the pieces. No problem. They won't find anything. Nice chopped up little pieces left for the dogs. Uh, so that sense of entitlement, brings the idea that what is normal for me must be normal in Baghdad and Chattanooga and Manila and Mumbai. What is normal for me should be normal for them because I am the apex. That's the result of entitlement. That's the result of stability for a very long time. Solution, peaceful solution. For heaven's sakes, at least once let the people have, one of them, not people who are for the rich, by the rich, but at least them. If the sense of entitlement has to go away, and the sense of entitlement means breaking up the dynasties. And breaking up the dynasties is basically going to the patent office and declaring zero. Here is a better way than revolution. If tomorrow morning all the patents are turned to zero, if you say we're going to turn the clock and this year would become year zero, and we start going to accept patents from this year again, and have a, have a sunset on the patent, on the whole patent book. But again, you can't change dynastic wealth that brings about that sense of entitlement. Think, whoever is still part of the JP Morgan Chase dynasty, who owns the bank and who's major shareholders in the bank, that's dynastic power. How you're going to break that up, which brings the sense of entitlement, which brings the wars. How you're going to fix that with just, opening up the patents? You can't. You basically have to give a haircut to everybody, take all the money back, and say, for future purposes, nobody can make 20 times more than their lowest paid employee. No business owner, no CEO, nobody involved in any company can make more than 20 times their lowest paid employee. Then you stop this inflation as well. It's capitalism, but there is a cap on how much you can make. It's still capitalism, but it's a cap on how much you can make. And I think that's the ultimate solution, because it puts a damper on human greed as well. If you cap the highest income, it will put a damper on human greed. And human greed should not be celebrated, because all animals are greedy. I mean, we humans, you humans, like to are amused by any if you see an ungreedy, unselfish behavior in an animal, you make a video out of it, and suddenly the video goes viral, because you don't expect animals not to be greedy. Well, humans are also animals, so naturally we are greedy. Naturally, that's a natural thing. It comes normal. Greed is normal, but it shouldn't be celebrated, because in, in a social environment, if you want to keep a cohesive society together, if you want to keep a cohesive society together, there must be enforced a cap for greed, because wolves don't make a good large societies. Wolf packs are known to be limited in numbers, from 5 to maximum of, I guess, 50, because it's a fucking wolf pack. They're hungry and they're greedy, and if they're very hungry, they will not recognize friend from enemy, and they kill their weakest member and eat them off until they can find a non-member of the group that they can kill. So this goes the extent of greed. So this should be, educated, civilized, adult people, not celebrated like, Wall Street, the movie Wall Street, and the effects it had on North American societies, on English-speaking world. Wall Street is had this celebrative effect of greed. Greed is good. Yeah, greed is good if you're living in a wolf pack, but if your children who go to private school have to live in the same cities that children who didn't go to private school went to public school and learned absolute shit, didn't learn absolute shit, and now one generation, two generations, three generations later, your privately educated multi-generational dynasty, their children have to live in the same cities that these multi-generational poverty-stricken unfortunate casualties of democracies have come into being. So these don't match. These don't match. You can't have a cohesive society when there is so much difference in education of the 1% and the 99%. Therefore, democracy would not work because the 99% have a much easier time of understanding Joker than the professor. If 99% of the population are educated by public education and the public education sucks, so that those 99% will find it more would find to will find will prefer to have a beer with a joker than a professor. You see what I'm saying? So this democracy business at its base, it's meaningless because I don't want to be intimidated by having a drink with a professor, but I know I'm not going to be intimidated. I'm going to have a good time if I am having a beer with a joker. You see, it's not that difficult. So democracy popularity as its base, it's flawed as a system to pick a leader. But then there is a brag going around that no, we have to actually, our system is so good, we have to go take it to Kabul and Baghdad. The only way out of it is to break up the dynasties. And breaking up the dynasties, in order to take away the entitlements, you have to break up dynasties, and breaking up the dynasties is not a simple task. It doesn't just happen. There could be an agreement, but that's the point where either the bureaucrats have figured that out, or the Trump crowd has figured it out that breakage of these dynasties, these monopolies, is the only solution. For example, the Mars have should be given, not only cut down to very small companies, corporations, preferably local, in every state, in every city, back to the small candy company filling the candy rolls in the gas station. Not only that, is having literally city candy production in limited to cities, and that's another sad thing about the corporate culture of McDonald's and Burger King and Walmart, is that everywhere starts looking the same. Everywhere there is going to be consistency throughout, as if we are all on an assembly line and we all want consistency. It's as if life is an assembly line and the consistency is the only thing that matters. But if you cut down corporations, imagine the number of ways that these candy companies are going, these local candy shops have to be competing with each other to grab local markets, to grab gas stations. They have to improve on their product or they have to change their product, and the variety comes in, and then you start seeing a little, Oklahoma starts looking a little different than Tulsa, or Tulsa start looking a little different than Oakland. But as it is with Burger King and McDonald's and Wendy's, it's almost the same. Almost. So the point is this breaking up the dynasties is going to be better for everyone. Even the consumers of candy, there's going to be different varieties in different regions of the planet. Different states, different cities have different variety of candy because, that's how they differentiate it from each other. Because they're small companies, not Mars providing M&Ms to 300,000, 3 million gas stations, 30 million gas stations across North America and Western Europe and wherever NATO has a foothold. You see the connection, M&M and boots on the ground. I kind of assure you that gas stations in Iraq didn't used to carry M&Ms, now they do. That's more profits for M&Ms. And that's the thing. I mean, more and more M&M has to appeal to the bigger and bigger crowd, and that's where the LGBTQ love comes about, because M&M needs to appeal to the majority. And what is, for a corporation, sometimes the majority believes in this, the corporation believes in that, and sometimes the majority believes in this and corporation believes in this. And that's where you get fascism. When the corporate interest becomes a popular, is when the corporations are too big and only one person is in charge of a lot of wealth and power, whatever decision that one person makes about who should be the leader is, is consequential. And corporate leaders are, they're really the greedy people who have become corporate leaders. There are no homeless people, corporate leaders. People who lost everything through giving, they don't become corporate leaders. People who have hold the door open for others don't become corporate leaders. Are you fucking kidding me? The one aspect of rising through the rank is clear. One aspect of just rising through the system is you shut the door behind you. You don't all hold the door open, and or you hold the door open for exactly the person you want to pass, but then shut it. You know, Democratic Party's recent moves comes to mind. I'm sorry. Apparently, there is no solution except breaking up the dynasties, all the dynasties, political, economic, without going to hopefully without going to nuclear war. Before going to nuclear war, because again, that the conflict between the East and the West is over entitlement. The West, the pink skin, the Anglo-Saxons, the Europeans and their relatives in North America feels entitled to be in control of the whole thing, because it was in the control of the whole thing for a couple of decades after Soviet Union gave up. But people grow, other nations grow, they learn, they improve, and you feeling entitled to a cut of their business is, well, is entitlement. And eventually somebody doesn't want to give you their lunch money, and it's the wrong person, it's too big or as powerful, and suddenly the whole cafeteria turns into shit, unlivable shit show, because you have met your match. Now we have nuclear war. That's the sense of entitlement. That even, you know, John McCain came out and said, yes, Russia, we can take them on. They're a gas station with nuclear weapons. Okay, but should you want to take them on? This sense of entitlement that Russia should be ours, their land, their resources should be open to our corporations. They shouldn't be reaping the profit of their resources. No, that land is too big for them. They should be proud. Yeah, Mars and Chevron and Raytheon should be reaping the profits of that land, not those motherfuckers. Entitlement. And relatively speaking, the Russians are small, newly born. It's only a couple of decades old. But Uncle Sam's managers are the ones, and that's why Russia feels only entitled to their neighbor in having influence in their own neighborhood. But Uncle Sam's managers feel they should have influence in Russian neighborhood. That's the imbalance of entitlements. They're not even meeting halfway. Russia is on its own doorstep, and Uncle Sam is on Russia's doorstep, and they're not halfway. Obviously, the West feels more entitled. Why? Because the dynasty in the West has lasted longer. Peacefully, you got to break up all dynasties, even the candy dynasty, as I said. McDonald's and Burger Kings and Starbucks, they all have to be they all have to be broken up to very small pieces if you want a peaceful capitalism to continue. A peaceful, small-scale capitalism, and the way you stop that is just you declare everything national on one day, nationalize everything, and then you say, okay, you can start all, or you tell your people that you can start all over, but you can't make 20 times more than your lowest paid employee. That's the only way to prevent entitlements, sense of entitlement. When, Mr. Hilton, the owner of the Hilton, for example, a metaphorical Mr. Hilton, cannot make more than 20 times his doorman, a doorman at one of his hotels, any of his hotels, no more than 20 times. You know what happens? What happens is Mr. Hilton will be satisfied with one, maybe two hotels because he sits down and does the math on his paper, on his calculator, and finds out that if he goes from two hotel to three hotel, suddenly he has to give all the money, extra money that he makes, back to the government because it goes over 20% of his lowest paid employee, of his doorman. So Mr. Hilton stops at two hotels. What happens next? Well, Mr. Hilton has a lot of time. Will spend it with his children. Get to know them. And just imagine a metaphorical Mr. Hilton, who the owner of the Hilton hotels. What happens if you put a cap on his income? If you say, okay, he turned one hotel into two hotels, and at this point his income is 20 times his lowest paid employee. What happens now? He has to spend more time with his family, friends, travel, learn, backpack. He can't make any more financially, materially. He can't make any more. He's making his top income. Now he has to be of. He may have to actually. He may want to, out of boredom. He may want to volunteer and go, feed orphans. You see where I'm going? He has time. He can't grow his business because any more than 20%, any more than this, he will push them over the limit that he can make, and he has to give it all back to the government. So he's like, might as well work for free. Let me, read, learn, travel, volunteer. You know, you don't see the head of J.P. Morgan Chase volunteering because there is no cap to his income. Legally, there is no cap to his income. The head of Goldman Sachs, or the top ring of Goldman Sachs, don't have a moment of peace because they're always on call. And I have a feeling their children suffer because of that. Although they're very intelligent people, but their families suffer because although they're making millions and millions of money, but they're always on the edge because if you don't limit human greed and you leave it at the wolf level of greed, there's no limit to it. It will be always on call and it will always be stressed. If you put a cap on greed, there will be no stress. Absolute no stress. You know why? Because the guy who make it to 20 times his lowest paid employee, even if he flops and goes bankrupt, he still knows he still can make it to that point. He may not be intelligent enough to make it to a further point, but he knows he will be, even if he goes bankrupt, he knows that he will be able to make it to that point, at least, because he made it once. So, a lot of this tension of losing everything, a lot of this tension of not making enough, not keeping up with the Joneses, a lot of this tension will go away if you put a cap on the highest income. Basically, the IRS doesn't accept any higher income than this, period. If you make higher than this number, it's arbitrary, a number picked when they have figured out how much a night watchman makes in a Walmart. They find out how much a night watchman makes in a Walmart, really, and they say, okay, this is the top number. Nobody in the country can make higher than 20 times what he's making, period. You make a dime over that, the government will collect it. End of story. You will have brand new capitalism, and you have a never dying capitalism, and much more, cohesive society. Much more cohesive, much more sane. What is better than this better distribution of productivity of society, so people can use that productivity to educate their children and get better housing for themselves and get a better healthcare for themselves. What could be better than that? Having this wealth turned into gold and sitting in Goldman Sachs, or sitting on some paper somewhere. People are not don't have enough funds to educate their children because they're making 1/2000 of what is the boss is making. But then this extra productivity has turned into, I don't know, money in the mattress, gold bar up Mr. Menendez's ass. No, I'm sorry, in his jacket. Did I say his ass? I meant his jacket.